Hey, today on the podcast, we have Heidi Baker. On Instagram, she goes by Strong Mama Miles. And by the end of this conversation, you will see that that is a fitting name. I really enjoyed this conversation, learning about the No Business 100. It takes us a little bit while in the conversation for me to remember to say that we're talking about the No Business 100 in Tennessee. Uh, but in this episode, you'll learn all about that race. You'll learn about how little I know about geography in the Eastern United States. And thus, this is why this podcast of exploring East Coast and European and Australian and New Zealand, like all the races I can possibly find around the world, is so helpful for expanding my imagination for geography. But eventually I learned that Kentucky is north of Tennessee, and this race starts in Tennessee and goes up there. But we had a good time. We laughed, learned about Heidi's mentality and the Georgia Jewel and preparing, and the Kettle Moraine that she's running and preparing to do the No Business 100. And it was just a great conversation. So I hope by the end of this, I have earned a follow on Spotify. Don't hit follow until you found value in this. But if you do, if you'd follow us on Spotify or Apple or wherever you're listening, that would be a huge help. I'd be very thankful. All right, here's Heidi Baker. Season 3 of the DFL Before DNF podcast. My name's Josh Rosenthal, founder of Borderlands Trail Running. Season 3 for me is essentially how I'm dealing with this FOMO of I want to run every 100-miler. I want to run every race I can, every trail race I can. And it's just not doable. Even if I, was a speed goat Carl or Jeff Browning, could go into my 50s and still thrive. There's still more races out there that I want to do than my body would let me do. And so I wanted to, in lieu of doing some of them, I just wanted to do a deep dive into them. And there's a handful that were on my list that were, let's say, obvious, and ones that I knew that I wanted to do that were kind of on my short list. Everybody wants to do Western states, or I want to hear more about Western states. Everybody wants to do UTMB. In my neck of the woods, it's also Wasatch and the Bear. But then I opened it up to the community and said, hey, what are other ultras out there? I think by and large, a lot of the ultra media is Western United States biased. It's just what we hear about the most. And that's because of the iconic Western states, probably, and some other iconic races out here. But when I opened up to the community, they said, hey, we want more East Coast races. And I'm also just interested in more international races, especially as my family prepares to move to France in a couple months. And I just want to go see more of those races out there. So we do have the Sormlands, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing incorrectly, Sormlands 100 coming up, based out of Sweden. So in all of that, the kind of the joke was like, hey, I'm looking for some Southern accents. I'm looking for some, that Southeastern United States flair. And so we had Jason Atnamp talk about the Yeti 100, which was super cool to me to hear of such an iconic race that I should have heard about a long time ago. But again, my fixation on the West. So today we have Heidi Baker, and on Instagram, she goes by Strong Mama Miles. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I doubted myself in that moment. And we've just kind of crossed paths over Instagram over the, the last year or so. And she's starting to train for her first 100, though she's trained and ran a lot, and her content is all about, empowering runners to do more than they thought was possible. So before we get any further, Heidi Baker, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Where are you right now?
I am just outside of Savannah, Georgia. Just moved here a couple months ago. So.
Okay. So, my Western bias, is going to be here all over the place. Savannah. I mean, I've been to Atlanta, and I've been stuck in traffic there for what felt like 2 days, I think. But other than that, I don't know the area very well. So where's Savannah? Let's say in relationship to Atlanta.
Savannah is literally situated like right below South Carolina. Like I could be in South Carolina in like 20 minutes. And It's like right on the coast. So we're actually like 4 hours from Atlanta. And I mean, it's kind of it's that weird spot of Georgia that's kind of between South Carolina and Florida, where you're close to everything. Because I could be in Florida in like an hour and a half too. So
okay.
But yeah.
Are you close to the panhandle of Florida? Is that where it is?
No, it's the like the Atlantic.
Oh, I see. We're coming like across that part where Georgia comes across.
We're like right on the coast there. So still kind of exploring this area and getting to know it, but so far we like it. It's a pretty cool it's a pretty cool city just in general because it's not like a big city in this. I mean, it's
Yeah.
big. There's a lot of people here, but like if you look at Savannah, there's no skyscrapers. There's no huge tall buildings. Kind of
That's cool.
it's a unique like historical city that's kind of fun to explore. So
isn't it kind of a food destination
yeah,
too?
it's really big in like food and then drinking because like they have like the policy where you can walk around the city with an open container and stuff. So
Whoa.
it's become like a big spot for like bachelor and bachelorette parties and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm remembering, there was, maybe if I'm right, there's a bit of a rivalry between one of the South Carolina food destinations where like shrimp and grits was super popular. And anyway,
Yeah.
my mind works in weird ways. My greatest strength is also, or my greatest weakness is also my greatest strength. I don't mind being stupid and not knowing something or thinking I know something and being dead wrong.
Right.
So anyway, you're in Savannah. Now I know where that's at. And you are preparing for the No Business 100. And when I mentioned on Instagram that we are going to talk about the No Business 100, the race director reached out. Garrett, who's one of the co-hosts of Trail Trash podcast, he mentioned his love for it. And so what's fun is just like when I did Yeti, a race that I hadn't heard about, people reached out just like super stoked that we were talking about it.
Yeah.
And now I got the immediate same thing with No Business. It seems like a well-established race. I would say my only issue is that I don't mean to hate on run sign up, but when you try and do a deep dive on a race, I'm always just curious about certain things. And maybe it's ultra sign up made me interested in certain metrics that run sign up doesn't give me. And so maybe we'll blame ultra sign up. But as I was trying to do a deep dive and learn more about it, going to their website and all that, it's clearly an established race. Great website, great race director. How did it come on your radar?
I just follow a few people on Instagram who had run it last year. The gal who came in, she was, I think, third overall and first woman last year. I've known her through, I'm not like super close to her or anything, but I just know her through the Georgia Jewel race that I did. Involved with that. Like she swept last year. And she was like right behind me the whole time because I was DFL.
Oh, nice.
We
are kindred spirits.
Yes, absolutely. But she, I just kind of knew of her and follow her on Instagram, and she's Lauren Runs for Grilled Cheese on Instagram. She's a fun follow. But she came in third overall and first women's last year, and that race kind of came on my radar just seeing like a few people finish it, and it just looked really like scenic and beautiful. And then after I finished Georgia Jewel last year, I knew that I wanted 100 this year, and I wanted to give myself like a year to kind of get there. And so I just did a ton of research on 100 milers near me. Well, not so near me anymore, but over on the East Coast pretty much. That it just kind of stuck out to me because, I'd ask people like, what's a good first 100 miler? People suggested Yeti. People suggested Blackbeards. I don't know if you've heard of that one out on kind of like Outer Banks coast. And that one's just like flat. I like some change. I don't like a perfectly flat course. I like
you like the variety.
I like the variety. I like a course that's and for my first 100, like I'm all for like really challenging courses. Like they excite me and I like hope to do them. But for my first 100, I wanted to do something that was attainable, but also gonna give me a challenge and some variety and some like scenic looks. I really hate running. Just the idea of running flat for 100 miles sounds terrible to me. So
is the variety a thing for your mind or for your body? I like the variety because I don't mind a race that has a lot of hiking because it's just a switch up of the muscles and all that sort of stuff.
Both, honestly, like the change of scenery just for like my mind, and because I like to, I don't know, ultra running is like sightseeing for me. It's like a way to see things that I don't get to normally see. So that's kind of part of the factor, and then also just the body, because if I'm going on a flat course, like I feel like my muscles get so much more exhausted so quickly because you're using the same muscle over and over again.
Yeah, that sightseeing is a good way to put it. I've never thought of it that way, but there's a spot at Zion where it's like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. Maybe I'll bring my family out here.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh, it's a 7-mile hike to this lookout
Oh
point,
gosh.
and I would never have done this otherwise, and I'm sure
Right.
not going to drag a 4-year-old out here.
Well, it's funny when I first started running, before I was even in the ultra world yet, I didn't even really know about it. But when I just started to run, we were actually living in Germany at the time, and running
Okay.
became like my way to like, oh, let's go to Madrid because I can run a half marathon there, and then I can see the
Oh,
city,
cool.
and like it just kind of
Yeah.
became like my way to go. See things around me. So I'm less of a like sign up for races that are like in my backyard and more like this is my
Uh,
opportunity to travel and like see something new.
yeah. Yeah, that's a cool perspective. And so now I think it's important to note that when you talk about people saying, "Hey, Yeti," or the one that you mentioned was in the outer, what'd
Yeah,
you say, Outer Banks,
Blackbeard's Revenge is what.
Blackbeard's Revenge, which is a cool name.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those and or Rocky Raccoon fits in that. Like
Mm-hmm.
ones with not a lot of gain doesn't mean they're easy. They're just not a lot of gain.
Right.
It based off everything I'm seeing with the No Business 100 is that it's got a lot of gain.
Yeah.
It's like 14,500,
Yep.
I think, in that ballpark. And I mean, you're in the sticks. So I mean, you clearly for your first one, though I don't know you, it seems like there's a challenge here. Like this is
Yeah.
like
Yeah. And
not that Rocky Raccoon isn't, or Yeti or any of those. This is just this has some Wasatch or the Bear 100 for
yeah.
Western context vibes. This is a big race.
Yeah. I kind of looked at it in the context of it was similar to the Georgia Jewel in the terrain that I did because I had considered just going back to the Georgia Jewel and doing the 100 this but it I mean I think in the 50 you got somewhere between 7 and 8,000 in the 50 miler at the Georgia Jewel. So I was like, okay, it's probably similar to the 100 at there, and
that's
somewhere
amazing.
new. So yeah.
Okay. And you've mentioned the Georgia Jewel to me a few times. This is different than the Cruel Jewel. These have nothing in common.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the Georgia Jewel, and what? So since that's the one that you've referenced a couple times leading up to it, and your finishing gave you confidence to go sign up for the No Business 100. Tell me about that race and that experience.
Yeah. So I actually went there in 2022 and DNF'd. And decided to go back for redemption in 23. So I DNF'd. I was behind on time just in general that year and had fallen and hurt my wrist. It was swollen and I was just in a lot of pain, came in past the cutoff. And so that was my DNF that year. But I decided to go back and see the rest of the course in 23. But it's a tough race. It's on the Pinhoti Trail in like North Georgia mountains. So Dalton, Georgia is where it starts. And then they bus for the 50 miler. So for the 100, you run down the mountain pretty much and then kind of run a few loops and then you come back. For the 50 miler, you do like 2 loops in this more like, so the first like 14, 15 miles is pretty flat. And then you climb the mountain and then you have like a lot of like elevation up and down the rest of the race. So that's for the 50. So they bust you down and that's where you start. And then you just run back essentially.
Dang.
So yeah, I actually came close to DNFing again this past year. I came into the 31-ish mile aid station. I think 8 minutes past the cutoff. And the race director was there. And I said DFL before DNF and I was like, I feel good. I'm ready to go. And he was like, do you think you can make up 8 minutes out there? I said, yes, let me go. Let me do this. I have to finish it. And my brother was pacing me. So he was there
I love that.
He said, I kind of didn't give him an option to say no to me. I was like, no, I got this. I'm going to do it.
I mean, that's impressive. Another thing that tells me something about you, because sometimes when you're that far behind and things, I don't know if things were not going well or whatever it was, but sometimes when you're that far behind, the mental recovery is much harder than the physical recovery. So that you were there and just like, hey, I know I've timed out. can I talk you into this? I've had it the other way where it's like I showed up at Kachina Mosa 100K out here, passed a cutoff, and the race director was like, "Hey, can you get back out there and go?" And I was like, "Please stop. Please don't even offer that." Like I timed out.
Yeah,
Give me this.
It was a rainy day that day. And so I had the reason I was behind, I mean, I felt great. I hadn't fallen. I was feeling good. Because falling is a very typical thing for me, unfortunately. But
what I want elites to hear, if there was an elite listening to this, is that that's one of our metrics of success. We haven't fallen today.
I had not fallen. I was feeling good. I was just behind because the rocks were slick. You're coming down from like a waterfall area at a certain point. It was raining and the rocks were just so slick. I was doing like 22, 24-minute miles coming down, and just set me back on time. But I was feeling good and I was going to finish that race no matter what. I was willing to just go out there, even if they said you're not going to be an official finisher.
Yeah. So you finished, the whole race before the cutoff. So you did make up those
2 minutes before the cutoff. Yes.
Love it.
But the fun part about the Georgia Jewel is there's this incline at the very end, before you come around to the finish at the Dalton Convention Center. And they call it Mount Baker because the last name is Baker. The race director's last name is Baker. And it is the steepest incline I've ever climbed. It's so short.
Really?
It's very, but it is. I mean, if I stood up, I would have rolled back. My brother actually had to catch me because I like stood up to kind of catch my breath, and he like had to catch me because I was about to. Like,
really?
It's the kind of climb that you think I should just get down on my hands and knees and crawl up this because it's very steep. It's like it's a very short distance, but at the end it just feels awful.
Yeah. Well, I can see then why this gives you confidence that you can push through hard things. And so then onto the No Business 100. Let's talk about start line. Where does that race start?
So it starts at the Pickett State Park there in Jamestown, Tennessee.
And that's Western Tennessee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of, no, it's not Western Tennessee. Sorry, I have my directions. It's more like Eastern Tennessee, mid to Eastern Tennessee, because it goes into Kentucky as well. The race is both in Tennessee and Kentucky. So I think it's like a little bit north of Knoxville-ish. I think I'd have to look at a map and see exactly where. But you run through both Tennessee and Kentucky in the race.
Oh, that's cool. I love it when that happens.
Yeah. And then it's kind of fun because each year they switch the direction of the race. It's one big 100-mile loop or 100-ish mile loop. And then they switch the direction each year. And so then people who complete it both ways get a special extra buckle if they do both. So
I love that from a runner's perspective. And then from a business perspective, that's really good marketing and like compelling someone to return. That's really good. I mean, I'm not being cynical about them as business people. I think for a runner, that's super compelling.
I haven't even finished the race and I'm already considering going back to the double.
Year 2. Oh yeah, I get it. Okay. So you're there, you start. Is the bulk of the race in Tennessee or is the bulk of it in Kentucky? Do you know?
I think it's a pretty even split. Because you kind of run and it depends which direction you're going, which like way you start kind of. But this year we're going counterclockwise. They started in 2017. And so odd years are clockwise and even years are counterclockwise. So we'll be going the counterclockwise direction this year. I'm staying, we're actually staying in Kentucky, because I just found like an Airbnb that's kind of a good central spot where like my crew and pacers and stuff can kind of travel around and get to places a little bit easier, but there's not really.
Is it inside the loop? You know, like you're making a loop. Is it inside the loop?
No, it's outside the loop. It's because I mean, this race is pretty secluded. Like there's not a whole ton around it. Like it's probably going to be a lot of driving for my crew and stuff, unfortunately, but
Well, I saw how many aid stations. It was like 15 aid stations.
Yeah.
Which, having put on a race here in the foothills of Salt Lake, we have 3 aid stations. Like I can't, from a race director standpoint, mad props to them for being able to orchestrate
And
so many aid stations in such a remote area.
from what I've heard, that's kind of what keeps people like wanting to do this race and come back. I mean, this race I knew before I signed up for it. I was up till midnight on New Year's to sign up for it because I heard it sells out very
Oh,
quickly.
really? Oh,
Each year
cool.
they sell out within the day, if not within
Oh, that's
hours.
cool. Okay.
So I mean, for only being started since 2017, I think that speaks a lot to like the community they've built and like the aid stations and the volunteers and stuff, because I mean, that's what keeps people coming back to a race. Like, in my opinion, is how well it's run. And I've heard like the course is perfectly marked and like it's a good one to run, especially like when it is like your first 100 or something, to have a really marked course with a lot of support, like the aid stations. And so
that's a good point. You want that feeling of all the things that could go wrong. You don't want a bad aid station or a poorly marked course.
Right.
That sounds good. And what's great then is that usually that's in something, and from my perspective, that's in a little bit of a more consumable, maybe a little bit easier course. Everything about this sounds hard for the runner and for the race directors and for the volunteers and for the crews. Like this is hard. So you also get that satisfaction of like crossing the finish line of something that was not handed to you on a plate. It sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say it, I wanted something that wasn't too challenging for my first 100, but then I look at it, I'm like, it is a challenging course. I need to not downplay it.
Right. Yeah. 14,500 is no day at the, I don't know, zoo. I don't know.
And I just moved to low country, so it's been interesting training.
Yeah. How are you training for vert?
On the treadmill and the stair climb.
Okay.
Yeah. The treadmills at my gym, they do at least a 3% grade, like descent, so I can get a little bit of downhill, which is something. And I just play with various inclines and declines and levels. I play around with it. I'm constantly like on the treadmill, just switching things up, which isn't ideal. But it's kind of what I have to do here, because I think the one hill that we can train on is the bridge that goes from Savannah over to South Carolina.
Yes. So this is what I was going to bring up. There's an ultra runner I really like, Casey Leighteig. I'm probably saying that incorrect. Leighteig. Elite ultra runner. I think she's from Nebraska. But she'll go top 10 at, historically top 10 at Western States or these big mountain runs. I think she's running Wasatch this year, which is, 24,000 feet of gain, but she lives in Nebraska, and from what I heard, her hill training is an on-ramp to the interstate.
Yeah.
That's all she's got. Yeah. So I mean, that is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But and you probably know this better than me, but you're running that Georgia Jewel. Like, I don't know how much memory your muscles have. Like, I know you can't put fitness in the bank necessarily, but those big climbs that you have already on your body, hopefully will come in handy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So what do you know about the course in general? So we've talked about some, or like specifically, we talked about general. Are there certain climbs, or there certain reputations at any point, any certain miles of this course that have caught your attention?
So I know that, I mean, it just kind of looks like a cool course in general. Like, you are going to pass by waterfalls. There's a lot of like, kind of, wooden bridges that you go over that like are scenic overlooks. There's at one point like a sandstone kind of cave that you almost have to climb like a wooden ladder through on the trail. It's just a really like diverse course. Like, if you just even
is there like an arch that you run through?
Yeah, there's like sandstone arches, and it's
wild.
Yeah, it's very, very like the variety of things that you'll see. And then, I mean, it being October too is just like peak East Coast like colors and like yeah.
I didn't think about that. When you mentioned it was in October before we started recording, I thought, that feels like a wild card for weather. Is it going to be super cold? But the colors, that's interesting.
It's going to be phenomenal. So,
wow.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of also what's appealing to the course for me, is just the amount of different things that you will see. I mean,
Yeah.
it mostly takes place in like a national park, so it's um, very like
Wow.
secluded and very like well taken care of. Um,
Yeah.
and so
Wow.
I know they have like really strict rules as far as like, you know, the crews, like what aid stations they're allowed at, and that's probably
Yeah.
to protect the integrity of the park. And
Yeah, I was going to say this is another thing to me that points to probably quality race directors is that they're going through national parks.
yeah,
That means that they've historically probably cleaned up really well. The
yeah,
runners have been instructed on proper etiquette, and that's because that's a huge deal to get that permit year after year. So that's
yeah.
cool.
Um, and then one thing I know is that even though it's the same course, clockwise or counterclockwise, it's seems to be historically more challenging going the counterclockwise direction.
Okay.
The theory is that, I mean, from what I've read in different race reports and stuff, is that there are a couple, although it's kind of a relentless course in the climbing. Like you're not really going to have a whole lot of level areas where you can just kind of take off and run. It's up and down and up and down. And
Huh.
although none of the climbs are like insanely difficult, there are a couple
Yeah.
that are more significant. And when you're going the counterclockwise direction, those kind of come at a sad time for a 100 miler, like in that 80 to 90
What
mile range.
what's oh, okay. Yeah, that is a sad time.
That is sad. I haven't done it yet, but I hear that's a sad time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're probably pretty safe on that. Though I may not ever do this one, I think I would be sad
Yeah.
in that moment.
Um,
So then that is interesting. Then that comes at mile 10 or 20 on the other direction.
yeah. So it's like you're fresh and probably feeling pretty good. The other direction.
Optimistic at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Optimistic. Yeah. You're still happy about life at that point.
It's probably probably should have said this earlier. This is a good, what we're talking about here is a good reason. Like the name is called No Business 100. I first thought, you first hear it and I think, oh, maybe, it's like, hey, is this a 100 miler for people who have no business running 100 milers? That would be like my type of humor. I would name something that. But looking at like the history of the place and through the website and some other research, this area was, essentially when settlers were moving through,
Right.
we're basically saying we have no business being here. Like this
Yeah.
is too hard. This is too difficult of a place to be.
I
And
actually,
so I guess that's a famous statement is that area is like the no business area or no business park or something like that.
yeah,
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
there was a settlement there called the No Business Settlement. And although I don't know like
Okay.
the full history of that, like the quote that they put on their website is, some say those who came here looked over the harsh, unforgiving landscape and thought they had no business settling here, while others made it clear outsiders had no business in these parts. So that's like where that name comes from. And it's an unknown quote
Yeah.
of who like said it, but I just think
Yeah.
it's kind of cool. So
This is more ignorance on my part. How close is this to where the Barkley Marathons are? Do you know?
I'd have to look at a map. I actually don't know. I'm kind
I'm
of
going to do that
curious.
in real time. Yes, me too. I think that's so. Let's see. No Business 100. What town did you say that was in for the No Business 100?
It starts in Jamestown, Tennessee, and then it
Jamestown, Tennessee.
goes up
I think
into
it's
Kentucky.
all right. I'm doing directions from Jamestown, Tennessee to
Frozen
Brushy
Head.
Mountain Penitentiary. It's pretty close.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Okay. People were listening to this. I'm confirming how my geography needs help. Let's see. Let me do the Frozen Head. I just did Brushy Mountain.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah. It's an hour away. So there's a great reference here to say this is hard.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not Frozen Head, Brushy State Penitentiary hard, but they're 60 miles apart from each other or less. So maybe that gives some context for the difficulty of the terrain.
Yeah, it's crazy because I actually lived in Tennessee for a little bit, and I was in Clarksville, which is just north of Nashville.
Okay.
And there's a lot of cool areas there to like hike and see things, but it's nothing like what Eastern Tennessee has. And so it's like, I remember always thinking about the Barkley Marathons, thinking Tennessee, it can't be that bad, but Tennessee can have some really like unforgiving landscape, and
Wow. Yeah.
especially when you go east to those mountains and stuff, it's
Yeah.
it can be pretty brutal.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I probably I try and earn these people following the podcast here. I think I'm going to earn some unfollows here just by how dumb I am. Did you know that Kentucky is on top of Tennessee?
I did know that because I used to live there.
Wow, I am so far off. So now this is making sense. I'm glad I'm looking at this map, and it's just, again, crazy to see how close it is to Frozen Head, but now I get it.
Yeah.
My goodness. In Texas, where I grew up in West Texas, all we do is study Texas history and Texas geography. We don't do anything. There is nothing beyond Texas.
And everything is pretty much north of Texas, so you don't really need to know any direction.
Right. It's real safe. Which direction? And if it's not in Texas, we didn't even care. So anyway, okay. So now that it makes more sense to me, gosh, this is hard. This is a hard first one, Heidi. Well, tell me then about you, more about you. Like, is the hard, like, why not do Yeti first? Like, I want to just go like into your mindset as an ultra runner, first time 100-miler. Like,
yeah,
you got something to prove. I did. I get it.
I guess so. I don't know. I like the mountains, and I like something hard, and I don't know. I like to look back on the course and look at the elevation gain and go like, holy crap, I did that. Like, yeah, I guess it's just a pride thing. I don't know. And also, like, I don't know. I've been to Yeti, and Yeti's a very cool race. My brother ran it last year. So I was there crewing him and supporting him.
Oh,
and that
cool.
was my first experience with it. But I mean, it's an awesome race. The idea of running on that crushed gravel down a mountain, then up the mountain, then down the mountain again just didn't really sound appealing to me for my first one. I don't know. I think it's just the and I like the loop course. I like just one loop.
Yeah.
I don't like the like I've seen this already and now I have to go back or like I think that was kind of part of my mindset in picking this. And the challenge. I mean, it was the time frame I wanted, and I mean, I guess that's kind of it. I mean, I like a challenge, and there's probably a very good probability that I'll DNF this race or get cut off for time, but but I'll still go and give it my best shot.
Yeah.
It's a 33-hour cutoff. That was the other thing too, is I was looking for something with a generous cutoff. So 33 hours is generous-ish. I
mean,
I'm not I know I'm not a sub 24-hour runner. I'm probably never going to be. And so, I needed something with a generous cutoff, but also that was going to keep me moving, like keep me going. Because if it's too generous of a cutoff, I know myself and I know I'm going to get lazy.
That's fair. Yes, that's a good point, because at Zion that was the same thing for me. I don't want to say I got like intentionally lazy, but it was just like,
that
36-hour cutoff.
I did a 24-hour race, and it was just a loop on like a track. It wasn't anything crazy, but it's amazing that just knowing I have the 24 hours and I don't have like a certain distance I have to reach in that time, how lazy I can become in that time, because I'm just like, okay, well, it doesn't really matter. And I didn't end up working out, but there's a race here called the Country Mile, or it's in South Carolina, and it's a 48-hour race. And I was going to do that in April because I kind of wanted to just see if I could hit 100 miles. I wouldn't even consider it my first 100-miler technically, because it's within 48 hours. But I just but it didn't end up working out just because we had just moved here and life was crazy. But but like I know that wouldn't have even been a good representation of what I can do 100 miles in, because I know how I would have, taken my time, eaten some food, taken a nap, things like that. So,
I get it. I mean, I still kind of live in this unreasonable place that despite all the evidence, there's only evidence to the contrary. There's part of me that thinks, can I still get a 24-hour finish somewhere? And for some reason, two out of 10 attempts, I still think that I can. But I think where I'm connecting now with the no business more, I think of it more like the bear. There are plenty of people who chose to do the bear as their first race, and I think it's 17 or 18,000 feet of gain, and
Yeah.
it goes from Utah to Idaho or the other direction, Idaho to Utah, point to point. But I mean, it's plenty of people's first race, and they crush it.
Yeah.
So I believe that that's what you'll do.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you don't, what are we doing here? What are we doing here anyway? You know, like you're
Exactly.
towing this line because you believe that it's possible, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And I've got a 100K coming up in a few weeks.
Oh, which one?
I'm doing the Kettle Moraine in
Oh,
Wisconsin.
cool. A lot of people reached out wanting to hear about that one at some point too.
It's,
So you're traveling to Wisconsin just for the Kettle Moraine?
well, yeah, my younger brother, not the brother who ran Yeti, my younger brother
Okay.
decided to dip his toes into the ultra world. So he's
Nice.
actually going to be doing the 100K as well. And that's another one that sells out very quickly. That went on sale New Year's Day as well. So
Oh, so you spent some money
I
on New
dropped a
Year's.
lot of money on New Year's Day. But that one sells out a lot too.
Okay.
And I think the 100 miler is supposed to be great. I'm not doing the 100 miler obviously, but yeah, I'm gonna do the 100K and kind of see where I'm at there too, as far as fitness
Yeah.
wise to complete that. So,
Well, going into the no business, what do you feel like your strengths are that work well for that race, and what do you feel like the weaknesses are that you're just having to pay extra attention to?
so my strengths are probably mental.
Yeah.
I'm pretty determined. Unless
Yes.
I like have uh a blaring like injury or something, I'm pretty determined to keep going.
Yeah.
And I have argued with a race director to let me keep going before. So um
that's,
so
that's great.
I'll keep going, like the mental aspect, and I've got like a good group of people lined up to kind of help me through that, because I know that mentally I'm going to have some dark mental points probably along that way. And
Yeah.
but I feel like I'm pretty good about communicating beforehand what I'm going to need
Mm.
somebody to do, like what I'm going to need
Yeah.
to hear and what I'm going to need somebody to say. Um,
Yeah.
and so I feel like the mental thing should be less of a battle for me as like than what it used to be. I've come a long way mentally.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, weaknesses. I mean, I just have the fact that I'm living where I'm living working against me. I mean,
Yeah.
I know fitness is what matters, and just putting in the miles is what's going to count. But the idea of climbs does scare me a little bit, just because I haven't been doing it as much. I mean, I can do as much as I want on the treadmill, but
Yeah.
it's doing it on the treadmill in a gym is different than doing it on rocky terrain when you're
Totally.
exhausted.
Technical. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hear it's a lot of rocks and roots, and I fall a lot. That would be probably a weakness that I have against me. And then fueling wise, I'm really trying to dial in like nutrition and making sure, because I have a tendency to stop eating when I'm running behind on time or getting
Yes.
stressed, and
Yeah.
that always messes me up too. So I'm really trying to dial in
Yeah.
that nutrition thing. So
Yeah. The way that I think about that is like your brain is like this bowl at first, like and it's a really big bowl when you're at the starting line, and by the end that bowl just shrinks, and the amount of stuff that your brain can hold is so
yeah,
small, and it's almost like you get to this point where it's just survival, and without like the good nutrition, then your brain can't even contemplate the reality of continuing
yeah,
forward.
yeah.
And this is the first. Go ahead.
I'll just forget to like, I'm like, I can't eat, like I
Hundred
can't take
percent.
the time to grab something out of my pack to eat, where it's like I won't be
Yes.
able to continue if I don't take the time to grab something out of my pack to eat. But
Yes.
and
Yeah,
then
it's
once,
not an intentional decision to stop eating. It's not like, oh, I should eat. I don't want to. I'm going to keep going. It's just like it literally 7 hours later, I hadn't even thought about it.
yeah. But I think I'm kind of working on that too, and I'm gonna be telling pacers and stuff to remind me to eat, and kind of
Yeah.
dialing in a nutrition plan as far as like keeping me going, because once you're behind on nutrition, it there's almost no going back. Like it's really
Yeah.
hard to get back. So
Yeah, I think especially with a 33-hour cutoff, like there's a scenario where if you're way ahead and you have that issue, you can chill for a few hours and
yeah.
just eat and a few rounds. But what here's a almost final question. You've mentioned your brothers twice.
Okay.
What would they say about you as an ultra runner? Like, so they're you're supporting them and their effort. They're supporting you. Like, are they on your crew? Like, how are they? What would their take be on you, having known you for a long time?
Um, well, let's see. I mean, my younger brother, who's doing his first 100K in June, he paced me for the last 18-ish miles of Georgia Jewel.
Oh, is he the one that kept you from falling back?
Yeah, yeah, that's him.
Okay.
That was
And he
kind of,
saw that and thought, "Oh, I want to do this."
yeah. Well, he kind of, that was his first experience with like ultra running and stuff.
Okay.
But I mean, he told me afterwards that just because we had a pretty dark point at one point on the race where it was
Yeah.
it was the what 90 something or 90. I'm talking like it was 90 for the 100 milers. I wasn't running 90 miles. It was like 40 something miles, like 47 miles.
Yeah.
It was only a few miles to the finish. But I knew we were late and supposedly it was a hard cutoff. And so
Okay.
I was really, really scared that they were going to try to sweep me for time. And I got really quiet for a few miles there. We were in the dark in like the Georgia wilderness, like, and the flags were hard to see. It was wet. It was just kind of scary. And,
Yeah.
he's trying to guide me and making sure I'm staying on course. And he was worried too that we weren't going to make it and they were going to cut us off. And we got to the aid station. They were probably the most supportive aid station there. They were like, no, keep going. You got this. Go finish it. Like, you're
Wow.
only a few miles. And after that, I was like, okay, like, we're good. Like, I'm like, but I had been rehearsing a speech in my head as we were approaching this aid station to let me go, let me finish. Even if I was like, all right, what am I going to say to them to convince them to let me go?
Wow.
Because I was just like, even if it's not an official finish, even if everything's packed up and everybody's gone, I need to get there.
Yeah.
And so I was willing to do that. And he told me afterwards, I thanked him because, I wouldn't have gotten through the rest of that race without him. And he said, it was just even when things looked really, really dark, like you just kept moving. Like I was keeping one foot in front of the other and I wasn't going to stop. And that
awesome.
he said that was the coolest thing to have like the front row seat too. So,
yeah.
and then my older brother, he wasn't able to pace me then, but I think he knows that I have that like that determination and that drive just after DNFing and coming back and coming in DFL.
Yeah.
It's probably that mental drive.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been cool to talk about the No Business 100. So
yeah, and I guess everybody got a taste of like some other races in it too. So sorry.
Yeah. I mean, and this is kind of my exploration here, and my willingness to just look dumb is that I don't know this part of the country that well, and it's cool to hear like what I'm hearing from some of these races is like a more cult following than I'm seeing out here in the West. Like, I think maybe people love Aravipa, people love Javelina 100, but I don't hear the same, and they're probably out there. I'm just saying I haven't heard the same sort of enthusiasm for a race like you talk about the No Business 100 and culture around that and everything. And the same thing with Yeti. But I don't know if Aravipa just has their permits allow for more people, so they're not cut off as much, or I mean, maybe they sell out.
Yeah.
Just using them as the example. I'm not, talking crap about Aravipa. They're just a great example of Western running.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think there's just a whole there's a lot of cool races out here that I mean I've barely seen have any of these races on the coast, and there's just so many to like do on my list. It's like I want to get out west and run races, on the West Coast and stuff, but there's so many here too on the East that are just, like phenomenal and exciting and really, really well run. I mean, to give the Georgia, I know it's always going to have a soft spot in my heart because it was my first 50, but the Georgia Jewel is a really well run event. I highly recommend that one. And like, The race directors are fantastic. And I know that Jason, who does Yeti, I know they've already talked about that, but the community he's even created with the Yeti races
Yes.
is insane. They do one
Yeah.
in Savannah, actually.
Oh, really?
It's a 34-hour. Um,
Oh.
and so it's a no DNF race. You just do as much as you can. But it's in
Oh,
January
interesting.
usually.
Oh
So
gosh.
so I'm hoping to do that one since it'll be like in my backyard pretty much. So and
Yeah.
kind of join that Yeti culture. But I'm doing
Yeah. Oh man, that's great.
I'm gonna start the Yeti 24-hour challenge today actually. So
What is that?
that's just so Jason does these like little virtual events too. And this one's the Yeti 24-hour challenge where you run 5.2 miles every 4 hours for 24 hours.
Oh, okay.
So you end up with like a 50K ish at the end of
Okay.
24 hours. But I just
Okay.
signed up for it because you can just do it on your own, like virtually. But I figure it's good for the
That's cool.
running in the night and getting up and going.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to do that starting today. So
Nice. Well, it's fun to hear about the culture out there, and yeah, I want to get out there for. I don't know if no business might be too big for me, but I'm excited for you. I'm going to do an episode soon on the Barkley Marathons as well, so it'll be fun to hear more about that terrain out there. But I think what I love about this, my favorite thing I learned today about the No Business 100 is that it's 60 minutes from Barkley, and everyone treats Barkley like it's the hardest damn thing in the world, and it sounds like it is.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
you're on the same terrain, just a little bit further north. So
Yeah, for sure. Now
that's awesome.
that's gonna change my perspective on it a little bit to think about that now.
Yeah, but hopefully it's just something that makes you feel tougher. What I was
Oh
talking about with 100 milers for me is that it's an outward expression of something that's inside me that I don't have any proof on the outside. Like I think I'm this tough guy, strong, capable of enduring, but I don't have any external proof, and that's why one of the reasons I love going for these. And so,
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
that's what I'm hearing with No Business
Yep.
is that it's tougher than people think, probably.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Heidi. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate.
Yeah, thank you so much.